So I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we can start with roll call, please. Director Eto.
Roshetto, Director, District 5.
Claire Wilson, Director, District 2.
Jeffrey McAnalloy.
Liz Drake, Director, District 3.
Tammy Campbell, Superintendent.
And now if you all please rise for the presentation of colors by Todd Beamer, High School JROTC. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion for the adoption of the meeting agenda.
I move that the Board of Education approve the meeting agenda of February 9th, 2016 as submitted.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I second that motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda of February 9, 2016 as submitted.
A motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now it's time for good news announcements. So, Director Wilson, if you'll lead us.
All right, I'd like to invite Sidonia Bowers up to the front and any family or friends that might want to join her. Puget Sound Skills Center has named Sidonia Bowers as Student of the Quarter for the second quarter 2015-2016 in the Puget Sound Skills Center Animation Academy. Sidonia is a Federal Way High School student. She says she's always wanted to work in an animation studio to create something of her own that makes an impact on people. PSSC animation teacher Peller Phillips calls Sidonia one of his best students. She's very detail-oriented, conscientious, and puts a lot of effort into each project that she does. In the PSCC animation class, students first refine their sketching and drawing skills. Then, using Adobe Flash, they pull those sketches into short-form animated films. Congratulations to our talented animator, Sidonia, for your accomplishments. We're very proud of you. All right, next up, Kendall Harris, are you here? Come on up. Anyone joining you? Oh, goodness gracious, you got your brothers in the house. Come on here. Thomas Jefferson High School student scholar and athlete Kendall Harris was recently featured in the Federal Way Mirror. As the article's author notes, Kendall Harris has had many obstacles placed in front of him in his life. He could have stopped trying and become a victim of his circumstances. Instead, he chose to face adversity head on. He chose to succeed. Kendall credits his teammates and his coaches for helping him stay the course. To him, they're more like family. They lend an ear when he needs to talk about what's going on in his life. Thomas Jefferson basketball head coach Kyle Templeton states Kendall is the most gracious kid on the planet. Kendall, we all want to honor you and your commitment to doing your best to stay in school. We're very proud of you.
I'd first of all like to say, go Raiders. I'm so proud of you. It's wonderful to see you here tonight. So go Raiders and good luck for tomorrow. So are there any Robo Falcons in the house? Robo Falcons, do come forward. The Lakota All-Girls Robotics team just wrapped up their season with a strong performance in the first Lego League tournament semi-finals last weekend at Chinook Middle School in Lacey. The team is made up of 6 students: Mailu Lucas, Autumn Martinez, Erin Ginter, Yuli Butz, Lily Tucker, and Lisbeth Delgado, along with advisors Mary Beth McCrummon and Judy Arms. These young ladies have competed in tournaments all year and make up the only Lakota team to advance to the semi-final tournament. They not only finished in the top 50% of teams in the semi-finals, the team also received recognition from the judges for their teamwork, peer support, and pride. Congratulations, Lady Robo Falcons, and thank you for representing Lakota Middle School and Federal Way Public Schools so well. Well done. Now, do we have Scott Allen with us? Do come up, Scott. Sequoia student scholar Scott Allen is a competitive archer who has a growing collection of trophies and has won several state championships in his division. Scott is in 8th grade at Sequoia Middle School and is a strong student. He took up archery about 7 years ago, joining his dad and brother, and has since become a serious tournament archer. Fresh off a first-place finish at the State Multicolor Championship, Scott traveled to Las Vegas on January the 29th and 30th with his parents to compete in an international competition. Scott did well, finishing in the top third of all participants, pros and amateurs alike. The Las Vegas tournament is one of the largest of its kind, with nearly 3,000 archers from all over the world taking part. Congratulations, Scott.
Okay, will Principal Joni Hall accompany Todd Beamer students Jennifer Kim and Seijin Lee? They are in today. Unable to come.
Come on.
Todd Beamer student scholars Jennifer Kim and Seijin Lee were both selected for the 2016 President's Scholarship from Pacific Lutheran University. The standards are high. Students must have a 3.8 grade point average or an SAT score of 1,250 or higher to be eligible to apply. Of the 600 qualified applicants, around 130 received the scholarship. They are chosen for their academic achievements, co-curricular involvement, service, and leadership, and their potential to affect positive change and leadership in both the academic and co-curricular life of the university. Both Jennifer and Sajine have maintained a 4.0 grade point average and are National Honor Society members, but neither has rested on their academic laurels. These young ladies both actively volunteer for Honor Society and We Day community service projects. Both are musicians participating in Todd Beamer bands. In addition, Jennifer is a member of the Tacoma Youth Symphony, while Sajine is a member of the Federal Way Symphony Orchestra. The Pacific Lutheran University President's Scholarship is worth $25,000 a year. It also qualifies Jennifer and Sajine to interview for the next level of PLU presidential scholarships, which includes just 5 full tuition Regent scholarships. Congratulations to both Jennifer Kim and Sajine Lee. You're welcome. Great kids.
It is an honor this evening to recognize Federal Way Cares for Kids, a coalition of multiple community agencies which serves our community's families in need. I would like to invite the following guests to stand as I call their name and walk towards the dais. With us this evening, representing their respective agencies, are Pastors John and Wendy McIntosh, Amy Longnecker, Jill Dewitt, Chief Andy Wong, Federal Way Police Department, Battalion Chief Kevin Crossan, South King Fire and Rescue, Tracy Oster and Jennifer Youngblood, Communities and Schools, Federal Way, Robin Korak, Multi-Service Center, and Susan Moss, Life and Health Chiropractic. Other participating agencies include St. Francis Hospital, AmeriCorps, the City of Federal Way, Heritage Bank, Alaska Airlines, and Federal Way Public Schools. School staff will tell you that for a number of our students, the holidays are the most difficult time of year. Thanks to the work of those we are honoring tonight, parents and students attended an event hosted by Federal Way Cares for Kids just prior to Christmas. Parents were invited to select multiple presents for their children and wrap them with the help of volunteers. At the same time, students were invited to make a gift for someone important to them. The coalition was formed to pool resources to more effectively and efficiently reach families who could use a little support. As a result of this team's admirable work, 220 families with approximately 736 children had what so many of us take for granted. Their goal is to serve 300 families next year, and in future years to expand services to provide support for other issues throughout the year. I would like to take a moment to thank you for your commitment to our families and our children. I was there personally, and I could tell you, I could see on the faces of those students that for many of them, that feeling wouldn't have happened had you not been there. It was absolutely incredible, and it will be bigger next year because we're going to make sure that we support you and partner in every way possible. But when we think about heroes and sheroes, this is what we're talking about. So thank you.
And now we'll move to a legislative report from Director Drake.
Hi, everyone. So, we, Director Wilson, Director McAnalloy, Superintendent Campbell, and myself, we all attended the legislative conference last weekend before last, and it was just amazing. We spent Sunday in a variety of different sessions. This is a steep learning curve for me. It's just amazing how much I'm learning. So we heard a lot of information about what's going on in Washington State, and there is a lot going on. The bill, every week, there is a bill watch list, and this is put together by WASDA, and 20 pages this week of bills that are being heard in either the House of Representatives or the State House. And it's just amazing the amount of energy that is, I think from a distance we think nothing is much going on. But in meeting with our representatives, and we met with District 30, 33, and 47, the legislators were dashing around, and genuinely dashing around from one meeting to the next. They met with us very graciously. And we, with our legislative platform, went through what for us here in Federal Way are our key issues. And we were very passionate, and we were very assertive in the fact that teacher shortage is huge. Teacher shortage in the whole of the state is a serious concern. But Director McAnalloy had some specific examples about what was going on in our schools just the previous day, and how many students did not have teachers in front of them because of a teacher shortage. The message is definitely getting through. We also talked about the science graduation requirement, and the fact that although it's been held off for a year, if action isn't taken, it's going to come back. And students who do not actually take biology in their sophomore year will be required to pass this before they can graduate. And it caused huge problems to our students year before last. And we are very adamant that this cannot continue, that this cannot come back. So we talked about that. We talked about the levy lid, and the fact that if the state doesn't handle in the future how the levy lid goes, it's going to dramatically impact the amount of money we can raise. And obviously, we talked about McCleary and full funding for basic education. So all of us from all the different districts were going to all our legislators. It felt as if we were really making a difference. And then when I looked at the bill watch list, all 20 pages, a couple of days ago, the main areas that are being handled by our legislators are ample, dependable funding. There's so much action. I'm not going to bore you with all the House bills and the Senate bills and the hearings and the dates. It's too much to take in. Even when I'm poring over it for hours, it's still too much. And great teachers in every classroom. There's a lot of activity. We met with our 30th District representative, Director McAnalloy, Superintendent Campbell, and myself met with Terry Hickle on Friday. And I've got to tell you how impressed we were with her preparation for our meeting. She had taken our platform, our legislative platform, and the concerns that we in Federal Way have, and she had obviously gone over each issue. And she is a co-writer of, and I will State Bill 6455, and this is a teacher shortage bill. And it's a bill that's trying to take action to alleviate, to work, to make the teacher shortage less of a crisis. So Terry is obviously definitely on board with working with the school board, with the school district, to make a difference. So we felt very excited about that. So as there is more information, I will share it with you. And what I am pleased to see, that House Bill 2734, graduation requirements, changes high school science assessment graduation requirements. So they are working on changing that requirement. They're on it. And it looks as if it's going to happen. So that's it.
Thank you. All right, next is public comment. So there is forms at the back. There's blue sheets if you'd like to make a comment. At this point, I only have one. So Gary Robertson.
Good evening, Board President McAnalloy, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Campbell. At the last school board meeting, I spoke to you about the new school board. Tonight, I'd like to speak to you about our Superintendent Dr. Campbell. Last night, I attended a strategic planning meeting, and Dr. Campbell brought up the fact that this was the first strategic plan for the district in over 20 years. And so tonight I'd like to also talk to you about her 100-day plan. Both of these endeavors are further proof of her outstanding leadership skills and her vision on what we need to do as we move forward. There was an America article on her 100-day plan titled Campbell Earns Extra Credit. If I had written the article, I had a better title that students can relate to. And that is Dr. Campbell earns grade of A+++. And Dr. Campbell is to be commended because she always follows through on her plan and does what she says she's going to do, which builds trust with the community. And her willingness to meet with all those people, and I include myself, and to gather all that data, analyze it, and then present it in an exceptional report to the board is truly impressive. And 3 comments on her report. Family liaison is critical to parent involvement and student success, and you are to be commended for funding a position at each school. And when teaching at Aneheim Middle School, I experienced the concept of team teaching, and I support that as well as teacher mentoring and teacher collaboration. And finally, on school lunch menus, I have worked in the lunchrooms and have a couple of concerns. Too much food is being thrown away because students don't like what they're being served, and too much pizza is being served. I think we need, in order to improve these menus, I think we need more feedback from kitchen managers, lunchroom paras, and students and parents on alternative choices of foods that would be both healthy and popular with the students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary. Next, Dr. Campbell, superintendent comments.
Good evening, President McAnalloy and members of the board. I have attended lots of events, but I'll just select a couple of highlights. One certainly is the Legislative Assembly, where we did have an opportunity to talk to various legislators, and I was impressed, especially with those folks who took the time to actually hear our perspective and give us some specific strategies on how we could continue to engage. I think there is this discourse asking whether or not anything will actually happen this year. We pressed to say that we can't wait, and we really pressed, and we had a formatted document sharing what the priorities are for Federal Way. So I think the community needs to know that we handed out information really talking about how McCleary would impact Federal Way. And I'm looking forward to continued conversations with our local legislators as well as City Council and the Mayor. I think we need to extend those conversations across multiple stakeholder groups. This week we had our core planning team meeting, which is the group that's primarily responsible for writing the strategic plan. And I can honestly say we can start to see it coming to life. We had a draft of it, and our community, our educators, our parents, our students are starting to really pull that plan together. And once it's actually finished, we will be rolling it out, and we'll be bringing this back to the board to celebrate, as well as to begin the hard work of implementing that plan. We had a community forum at Lakota last night. It was well attended. And again, our parents never cease to amaze me when they're talking about their hopes, their dreams, and their expectations for their children. And they really are coming in earnest and expecting us to hear those ideas and to act upon them. I also attended 2 high school planning nights, one at Decatur. I got to see our very own John McIntosh there with his freshmen coming into the school, as well as the high school planning night at TJ. Both principals were very much involved in sharing the information from our career planning guide. You saw students providing examples of what types of activities students could be engaged in. When I was at TJ, you had students from the debate team doing little mini vignettes so students could see what it would be like to be a part of that. There was the football team, the band, orchestra, all kinds of different examples. Because what we know when students go to our high schools, they need to belong to a club or some other organization outside of just core academics. We know when we get them hooked that they're much more likely to stay in school, be vested, and be a part of the community. Pedro Noguero calls that making school a home game for our students. And so I was really impressed with those 2 high school planning nights. So those are just a few of the things that I've been engaged in, not wanting to give you a comprehensive list.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. And I actually owe an apology to Sean. So we have one more public comment that I overlooked, even though she walked up here and handed it to me. So Sean Gates-Wertman, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
I'm just so happy to be here and to have the opportunity to speak with you all this evening. My name is Sean Gates-Wertman, and I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the Delta Upsilon Omega chapter, which is the alumni chapter of Seattle, Washington, or excuse me, the greater Seattle area. And we are here.
Hello, Soror.
Hi, Sor. How
I did not know.
you?
Same to you.
Wonderful. Well, we are here with the hopes of being able to connect with Federal Way schools, specifically the high schools, with our new education initiative called Ascend. And you'll have to excuse me as I refer to my notes to give you the full meaning of the acronym. So Ascend, which stands for Achievement, Self-Awareness, Communication, Engagement, Networking, and Developmental Skills. So we're looking to partner with your high schools, and I took a moment and reviewed some of the minutes from past board meetings, and I've gotten to see the wonderful activities that the student clubs are putting on, and the types of events that you all are looking to do and that you are already doing that really focus on developing leadership, developing wonderful academic skills, and I've just sort of been blown away by the things that I've seen within the minutes. And so we are just looking to create a partnership to work with students, work with teachers, and come into the school and provide different activities and resources to help the wonderful students here in Federal Way continue to blossom and be the wonderful leaders that I'm counting on for my retirement. So I have some additional information here, and we just look forward to connecting with you all in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move to school board comments. Director Eto, would you like to start us, please?
Okay. I think I would like to start by re-emphasizing the points that Speaker Gary Robertson brought up in terms of the kudos we should give to Dr. Campbell, because we do celebrate a lot of successes, but I don't know that we do justice in terms of really getting the public to realize the great work that's been going on, even in the short time that she's been on board. What we've seen almost immediately was the organizational change where we hired a chief academic officer. We saw how it was important that we allow students to find interests, and we heard the students and parents talk about the need to be able to accelerate their academic studies as well as to catch up whenever they fail. And in making school relevant, the block scheduling that's been put into place has done that. It gives more opportunities for students to explore career and technical education along with a college preparatory course. Along those lines, as Dr. Campbell mentioned, the Career and College Ready booklet that was put out, that was huge leaps and bounds ahead of any documents that we had provided parents before to allow them to see the different options that are available within the school district. We used to have a marketing problem relative to the Career and Technical Education program, which is very good with the help of the Puget Sound Skills Center. And so now this highlights it. And it's not mutually exclusive that you can either do college or you can do a career training program. You can do both. And so this outlines it very well. And then when the teachers and the community got together relative to how we can best accommodate professional development needs, she implemented a late start. And so these are all successes that I think the public needs to be aware of, and it shows how she's collaborating with the public, just as she had indicated when she came on board. So congratulations on all the successes that Dr. Campbell's had. I too has attended the Decatur Planning Night and the Thomas Jefferson Planning Night. It's great to see these enthusiastic students and all the clubs and activities they have available, because I think the more activities that are available, the more relevant school is for them. They can connect with friends, and like they say at work, the number one thing that keeps a person around is their boss. The second thing is having a friend at work. And so having a friend at school has got to be a big enabler to staying in school and finishing out. So it's great to see, and I also like to see the participation that we've had in our community engagement sessions. I attended the one at Lakota the other day and the one we had at the Federal Way Library. Well attended, vocal people that are very engaged in wanting to see improvement within our schools. And so all these were things that we said that we wanted to see in the next superintendent, and they're getting done. So it was very, very, very nice to see.
Thank you. Vice President Wilson?
Well, I was going to just share that Director Drake talked a little bit about the Legislative Assembly and the conference that was happening down in Olympia for the School Directors Association. And it was my second opportunity to be sitting on the board of directors for that statewide organization representing all the school districts in King County. So we have 295 school districts across the state, and the district that we represent, or that I represent, is all of the districts in King County. And so along with legislative information and legislative conversations was also just about policy and about how it is that with such a vast number of school districts and sizes, rural, urban, you can imagine the mix, kind of how you work forward and how you plan for what's to come, and how you come up with policy and practice, as well as really platforms and advocacy that meet the needs of students, but also can be done in the context of the different sizes and the different scopes of districts. Really the big part of that meeting was beginning the executive director search. So for my board colleagues here, we have an executive director from WASDA who is Alan Burke. And Alan Burke, for a number of years, worked at OSPI as assistant superintendent, and for the last number of years has really taken WASDA to a new level of operation and really taken it ahead in where it's been over the number of years as far as its advocacy, legislation, and really working with the new landscape of education in our state. And so he has recently announced his retirement, and so as a board, again, are in the process of doing an executive director search, which is very similar to superintendent search, if you can imagine. But also just as important, because again, that individual has to have some breadth and depth of knowledge, not only of the education system, but the vast array of constituents and stakeholders that they serve. So it's a very interesting conversation when you get 12 board directors in a room that represent a pretty broad spectrum of experience and beliefs, and it makes for great conversation. So I'm excited to see things happen as they move forward, and I know our board will be positively impacted, I know, by the change in that. Also wanted to say on the 4th of February, had the chance to go to the Boys and Girls Club of King County, the Youth of the Year luncheon, and not long ago we had a young man from Federal Way who attends the X3 Ron Sandwith Teen Center, who was a finalist for Federal Way for that honor, and his name is Kenny Tyson. And had the opportunity that afternoon to hear him along with 9 other of the finalists from the Boys and Girls Clubs across King County to share their story and to speak, and was very proud of him and his manner and how he presented himself in front of a room full, a large number of people. It was wonderful. I had a chance to go up to him after the presentation and also to his mentor and let them know how proud I was and what I thought of his presentation. I also attended the community forums, and I'll just say the student forum was just an off-the-chart experience with almost 90 students between 6th and 12th grade in a room sharing voices that really have the answers to things we keep asking. And continue to say, if you'd only ask us, you know, we have a lot of things we could share, and oh my goodness, there's wisdom there, and I know we'll be sharing that wisdom. I want to give 3 shout outs to some individuals. One of them is a parent by the name of Teresa Garcia, who has been a parent leader in our district and has children both at Todd Beamer and also at Panther Lake. And she was just recently named the Strengthening Families Unsung Hero Award, received the award for the state of Washington because of her work. She was nominated by one of our family liaisons at her elementary school, but she's also been, because of her work there, but has also been actively engaged in working with our Latino families in the Federal Way area, engaging them through the Empowered Latinos Association, which is the parent group has gotten together and really decided it's their job to organize and to make a difference for their kids. So I want to just shout out just how proud we are of Teresa. And then I also just want to say shout out to Ruhama and Omar, who are 2 students I know of, and I know there's probably more, who just recently been notified that they're Act 6 scholars. And Ruhama will be attending Whitworth, and Omar will be attending PLU. And again, couldn't be prouder of them and their leadership role and the work that they're doing. I will say TAF Academy has a STEM Expo at Seattle U this weekend. If anybody's looking for something to do on Saturday, it's always an amazing event. Seniors will be giving their preliminary senior projects, and then all other students will be doing their STEM experiments or their exhibitions. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Director Drake.
2 months into this amazing role of being a school board director, and I continue to be amazed. And I shouldn't be amazed, because I echo what Director Eto is saying about the feel that we have within our district at the moment. I've just been bowled over by the amount of energy, the amount of optimism, the direction of hope, and we can do this attitude everywhere I've been over the last 2 weeks. So I've been doing, just as everyone in this room has been doing, a lot of sign waving. And it's not just sign waving standing at the corner and just sort of wiggling a sign around the place. There's dancing, there is so much energy, and I think that energy is typifying what is going on in Federal Way School District. I also have been to the community strategic planning sessions, and I absolutely agree with Director Wilson. The student forum was absolutely spellbinding in the degree of intensity, seriousness, the direction that they knew they needed to go in to be successful. Now, at each forum, each place that we've met, we've been talking about what makes a student success. What is it? What are the goals? And our students spoke loudly and clearly, mastery of core subjects. Everyone else was sort of on the edge of not really saying what was needed. All the community forum, the students nailed it. And they nailed it in such a powerful way. I've worked with high school students for over a decade, but these students nailed it in a way that I've never experienced before. Their second was readiness for college and career life, and their third, whole child, healthy, safe, challenged. They know what they need. And Superintendent Campbell said, we're going to be going to them first next time because they know what they need in a way that we need to listen to, and we are listening to it. And I think at each forum, there is this sense of honoring everyone's voice and a feeling that we are, and people can feel that. And it's probably one of the most exciting periods in my life, seeing the growth as quickly as it's coming within our district. High school planning night at Decatur, I was there too. I think we all were there. And I'd just like to hold up, this is an amazing document. It's a document that David Brower went through with fidelity and with clarity to a gym absolutely packed with energetic, happy parents and students. They had the opportunity. I walked in a little early, but everyone was there doing this wave. You know, they have lines of students on each side, and you're walking down, and there was so much spirit. And yeah, we're in a great place, and I'm really enjoying time here on the school board.
Thank you, Director Wright. So we've got an hour and 20 minutes left. If you've not gotten your ballot in, you need to get it dropped off before 8 p.m. to make sure that we passed our tech levy. I'm sitting here watching cars pull up, and so if you've not done that and you're hearing this, please make sure that you vote and get your vote in before 8 p.m. this evening. I actually had the honor of being vice chair of the Ledge Committee, so going down the night before and getting ready for all 295 districts to show up and do that process to make sure we were ready to have our day on the Hill as WASDA. And so that's an honor to be able to do that and participate in that. Alan Burke will definitely be sorely missed. He works very closely with us to make sure that happens. I don't have a lot of other things that you've not already heard. I did attend the student forum, and I will reiterate that we must listen. As I've watched, I've actually attended everything from a strategic plan perspective, and the adults continue to dance around the issue when the students have hit it head on. They want mastery of core subjects. There were 12 of 13 tables that indicated that was one of their 4 tops. And the adults, even on Monday, when we came back and shared that, still kind of avoided it. When we began to dig in and understand, we had to actually pull, the consultant actually had to pull the adults along to make sure that we really dig into that and understand and include that holistically. And so students are pressing the adults as they should. I did attend a Sacagawea visit last week and actually got honored with pancakes as they were doing it in the self-contained program, and it was nice to kind of connect with those students, seeing what they were doing and the pieces that they were doing. I did attend core planning on Monday along with the community forum. And I also want to reiterate congratulations to Teresa Garcia. Her son actually is the one that got the scholarship as well, and she's done an amazing amount of work. It actually, when we sometimes make mistakes, and as we did with our superintendent search committee, it was she and Lizette that came forward and pressed the board, and I had to own that the way I had done the process wasn't right. But honoring that and seeing that, they become very active, involved in our school district and making, I mean, everywhere I turned, they're there as well. So it's great that they're participants and all that she's done over the last year for this district. All right, Dr. Campbell.
Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
One person that I definitely wanted to mention tonight is Kelly Tanner, Citizens for Federal Way. She has done an amazing job. Hats off to her. She has crafted this levy initiative from start to finish. I was standing with her on a corner a weekend before last. So much energy and so much heart for what our students need. So Kelly, thank you for everything you've done.
And I would just also like to thank Jason Brown. He's gone out and took signs and planted them all over the place. All those signs you see, Jason Brown did that work, along with our team. There are many of our own team who volunteered time, our teachers, everyone who's going out to make sure people understand the impact and the importance of this levy. So, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, Dr. Campbell, if you'll lead us through the approval of the 2016, 17, 17, 18 calendar presentation.
At this time, I'd like to invite Dan DeZone, our Chief Human Resource Officer, up, and Jason Brown, President of FWPS. They will be sharing with you the 16, 17, 17, 18 calendars, along with some of the interest that these calendars will serve in terms of our ability to educate all of our children.
Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Campbell, Board of Directors, President McAnally. It's a great pleasure to represent the students on behalf of this school's calendar and to have Jason Brown here as the FWPS President. We want to highlight the calendar, which you will see tonight for approval, by saying that our first tenet was to make sure this calendar was what was best for our scholars. That was our tenet. And it was great working with the teams so that we could understand the great work that had been done in the past and make sure that we developed a calendar moving forward. Jason wants to share a couple words before we share other highlights.
Great. Superintendent Campbell, members of the board. First and foremost, we are charged as an association and district with negotiating the annual calendar. And the reason we're able to do this work as quickly and as efficiently as we do is because of the collaborative relationship that we've had a long-standing relationship with our district. We are interest-based, which means we have a filter of what is best for the student, staff, and Federal Way community in all we do, and that's first and foremost wanted to share that. Special thank you to the members. It was comprised of both labor and management. We had our Chief HR Officer, Dan DeZone, Adrian Chacon, Thomas Jefferson High School Principal, Executive Director of HR, Mark Davidson, Deputy Superintendent Danny Pfeiffer, Assistant Superintendent Savin Klein, Olympic View Principal Marlon Newton, classroom teacher at Mayor of the Hill, Cindy Dennison, and we had our Kylo office manager, Michelle Hayes, and special ed teacher Thomas Jefferson, Daka Michaels. And what we did is we met as a committee and we collaborated and came up with what has been presented to you. I think you all have that in front of you. And we sent out the ballot to our members, 1,700 members last Friday. And results were posted Monday at 5. It has been ratified by the membership, and the next step in this process is to give it to the Board of Directors for your approval, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jason. I just also want to highlight a couple highlights on the March calendar. As you notice, the student-led conference starts in March, and so one of our tenets was what's best for our scholars, and usually it's in April. So if you notice, we changed it as a team because we really felt what was important, if we have kids that need help or assistance, we wanted some time. So the team really believed we didn't really have too many options. We really believed that's where we wanted to go. Wanted to highlight that. And if you notice on the calendar, you'll see there's not a lot of disrupted weeks. If we did have a day that we were going to use, we actually connected it. So we actually had full weeks and less disruptions for our scholars. So those are just quick highlights of some of the reasonings behind the development of the calendar. So tonight, on behalf of the group that put this together, the committee, we are seeking your approval for the school year 16, 17, 17, 18 school calendar, which I know families will also be excited about.
Before we do that, I'd see if the board has comments or questions before we do that.
I think it should be clarified on the point that we incorporated the professional development in a different way, in a way that the parents said was not working for them before. And so we got rid of the late start and implemented something different. So could you just state that further?
Sure. I also want to highlight, I didn't say that, but we have 13 days for next year that actually have the early release days highlighted for the families. Also the days that students get out early so they can plan ahead for all the things that we need to do to support the families and the kids. So you'll actually see on the calendar for 2 years those days on early release for early planning, which also helps us to start planning ahead to help support the schools.
I would just add, it's time for teachers to use professional learning communities. We're actually wanting them to move beyond planning, but more towards looking at student work and data and taking that and then responding real time to student needs. And we're spreading them out across the year so that teachers can do that frequently. Many of our surrounding districts have this time. And so I think that this will be something that will make Federal Way appealing to other teachers who want to have that professional time. We'll be continuing to partner to talk about how that time can be used and to assure our community that it's being used in service of the improvement of student learning.
Absolutely, and that has been an ongoing need and desire of the educators here in Federal Way, is to have that time to collaborate with other colleagues to talk about data and student achievement and what can be done to continuously be learning and improving on that. So that time is used for embedded PD, collaboration, and PLC time within the schools.
I had a couple questions, and one is that I know this time around with our early release days, we've had talked with families about the district taking their needs into account as well and making sure that there were offerings for families who didn't have access to care, either when it was a late start or now that there's an early release. And with 13 days, I think that's going to be, again, a critical thing to keep into mind. And I look specifically, I think if I'm reading the calendar right, in March, there will be 5 days where families will need to potentially figure out care. So I just want to make sure that because if you look at that, we've got student-led conferences, which are the 8th and the 9th, and then you've got a state in-service day, which is the 10th. So there's 3 days there, and then if you look at the 1st and the 22nd are both early release days. Potentially, I just think we just need to make sure that families understand that we know that they also have care needs. And when we have 3 days in a row, I just want to, really think about that in a way that says not that we don't do it, but we will do this, and when we do this, this is how we support our families. And then the only other thing I'll say with our SLC days, in my mind, critically important if we say that teachers will be there and schools will be there for families on those 2 full days, that teachers are there those 2 full days, that we don't think about it as a way to make a 5-day weekend or get an email that says I'm going to do SLCs on Wednesday or on Tuesday instead of Wednesday and Thursday. I just think it's important that we commit ourselves and then we hold ourselves to that. And I know there's always emergencies that come up, but sometimes I'm not always sure they're for the right reason, and it will help families also in their planning.
Director Wilson, I'd like to thank you for that comment. We also know that February 24th is our first early release since we've made the change, and we're committed to finding out how we're doing. So in April, we're going to be doing a survey. We did a communication last week through the communications department to let the families know early release is coming. It's February. We want to make sure that we all support it. And then the building principal supported that communication by sending something out to support what can we do to make sure we help you during this first change. So thank you.
I really appreciate that. Thanks.
I'm just going to reiterate what Director Wilson has said. I know as a building principal, when you build in an additional day like the 8th and 9th of March, and then you've got the 10th as state in service, it does make it that much more difficult, perhaps, to make sure that we have everyone present at the SLCs, at the student-led conferences. So I just want to reiterate that.
And you do have a commitment from FWA leadership that we will let our members know that. And contractually which was agreed upon obviously by the board, but both labor and management, is that staff will be available for parents and students.
So I'm going to reiterate, as I've sat through listening to strategic planning, it is a student-centered focus. And I can share as one board member that I'm concerned when we tie 3 days together that there's impacts we're not thinking about. We have a attendance issue in this district around students and adults. And when you tie 3 together and now you have 5 days tied together, I can see families saying, I'm going to blow off SLCs and I'm just going to take a 5-day vacation. Those truly are student days. They count as student attendance days, and we start blocking those things together. That's one impact, both from a student and an adult perspective, because we do have attendance issues on both levels. Next thing we need to think about is that we have some students that have impacts. When we have students that have additional days out, so you struggle through the weekend just to get them back Monday. You add 1 day to it, it's a bigger struggle. When you now make a 5-day break, it can take a week to recover from that, and it also has impacts from behavior that happens in schools. And so those are the other things we need to think about of all families. Not only do we, and I think it's already been said, we have some families that struggle to make ends meet, socioeconomic differences, and when you take 3 days in one specific week to have to cover and make those ends meet and have childcare to cover for 3 days out of a week, it just adds additional burden, and I think we need to make sure we think about that. We already have some attendance issues around student-led conferences, and when we tie it to an additional day, I'm just really concerned. So I think as a board, we really need to think about when we look at our ends, when we look at sub-ends 3, I think we need some bogeys or something set as a goal around student-led conferences, around student rights and responsibilities, because we need to ensure that we truly are participating. Students are participating. You know, I struggle to approve tonight, but based on us and what we're doing with alignment, what Dr. Campbell wants to do, and she needs time to make differences, I'll move forward and approve this based on that, but I have some real concerns, and I think as a board we need to look actively and making sure that we're not losing participation in SLCs, adding an additional day to it, and see how it goes, and evaluate it over the next 2 years to make sure that it truly is a student-centered focused, taking care of them on all of those levels. We need to look at discipline. Does discipline increase after these 3 additional days? All of those things need to be taken into consideration so we stay student-centered focused. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, I think what you were talking about too at the end is looking at SLC participation rates and having that as a data point that we actually monitor, right? Yes. Okay.
And I, you know, that students piece, I think we need to think about adult piece too when we look at attendance and adults pieces, right? It's because if the adults aren't in front of the students, then we lose that connectivity, and that's part of what I believe is an impact to our students attending when they don't have connection to their teachers because of attendance as well. So that's really not something we can tie to sub-N 3, but it's something that the board needs to think about too. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept the calendars as presented.
I move that the Board of Education approve the 2016-17 and 2017-18 calendars as submitted.
A motion, do I hear a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is our presentation of sub-ends 1. Dr. Campbell?
At this time, I would like to invite our very own Assessment Director, Martin Boonstra, up to walk us through the presentation around sub-ends 1. We've shared this information with the board at our last work study, but this basically is a baseline. I think that's what's important. And next year, we'll start looking at our targets, but we're starting to really be clear about the metrics that we're going to use to determine progress in Federal Way schools across all 39 sites. Martin, take it from here.
Thank you. Board President McAnally and members of the board and Superintendent Campbell, it's a pleasure to be here tonight to share with you our monitoring report for sub-end 1 around graduation and advancement. So sub-ed 1, the graduating and advancement sub-end states that each student will graduate with the prerequisite skills and competence to access college, career, and other post-secondary options. So there's 2 dimensions to sub-end 1 that Dr. Campbell has chosen to focus on. One of them is the academic knowledge and skills that are required for students to be successful through school all the way into college, and also the academic behavior, which is around the competence that students need to be able to access the resources and supports and to be successful as they move through academically through the K-12, pre-K through 12 experience. So when Dr. Campbell was selecting data for student outcomes, she is looking at establishing a baseline. So in 2015-16, we'll be looking at our results to make sure that we can collect the data accurately and reliably. And as we move into the 2016 and 2017 school year with our strategic plan, we'll be using our results from this year to set that baseline so we can set goals that are aligned to our strategic plan as we move into next fall. Quickly there, we talk, it mentions the rationale, and it says that as states select indicators, they should draw on an array of student data. So as we look at the indicators that we'll present to you tonight, They're around student course completion and success, their achievement throughout the K-12, pre-K through 12 experience, and post-secondary education. So really, we're moving to looking at the entire story that a student has as they move into the Federal Way Public Schools, beginning with kindergarten all the way into high school and beyond. So on this slide, you can see that picture painted for you. And we have the elementary years, the middle school years, the high school years, and the college and career years beyond high school. Outlined on this slide are some of the data points that we'll be looking at, and I'll walk through those data points as we go through the presentation this evening. So our first set of data is around the early years data and looking at what are the indicators that inform us how successful kids are in moving through the school system and through the Federal Way Public Schools. And we'll specifically be looking at kindergarten, readiness to learn, and reading by third grade. So our first indicator is called the WAKIDS, or what we call the Washington Kindergarten Inventory of Developing Skills. And so what this is this is an indicator that kindergarten teachers use to assess kindergarten readiness when kindergartners first come into school. There's 3 parts to this assessment that are outlined here on the slide: family connections, whole child assessment, and the early learning collaboration. What we'll look at today or tonight is the whole child assessment. And this measures 6 factors, 6 data points: social emotional development, physical development, cognitive development, language, literacy, and mathematics. The way that this is reported is that as teachers collect the data, they're filling out surveys and inventories, and then when it's finally reported, it's on a continuum of color bands, with purple being the most proficient. And the bands go from purple, green, yellow, and down to red. So let's first look at our WAKIDS data for students in kindergarten that came in this past September. This slide shows our kindergarten students disaggregated by race and ethnicity. The blue bar for each subgroup shows how many students in kindergarten, and the red bar shows how many students were in that purple band for kindergarten readiness, meaning they were overall proficient in the 6 areas that I outlined. In Federal Way, overall, we were at 45%, and we were right in line with the state average of 45%. The highest level of readiness that was indicated was in our white subgroup with 216 students and about 54%. The lowest level of readiness was in our African American subgroup at 36%. Our Asian, white, and multiple race subgroups were above average overall. And overall, looking at the overall picture as well, in terms of our Black, Hispanic, and Pacific Islander subgroups were below the average. The next data point is our second grade reading comprehension. And so this is end of year reading in the second grade. For this, we're using the Fontes and Pinnell assessment which teachers use. The Fontes and Pinnell assessment is a comprehensive system and it's a one-on-one assessment that teachers use to reliably and systematically match student instruction and their independent reading level. So for this assessment, teachers are asking questions of students about passages they're reading, and students are giving oral answers and retelling a story or trying to explain what was read and summarize. In Federal Way Public Schools, we had 1,414 students last year at the end of second grade, and of those students, there were 72% of them that met standard and expectations for that, for the Fontes and Pinnell. The next indicator that we'll look at in terms of reading proficiency is the third grade SBA ELA state test. The SBA again started last spring for our third graders all the way into 8th grade and high school. This slide outlines all of our student data by school for third grade on the SBA. Over here on the right, the green is the state average was 52%. The Federal Way Public Schools average was 39% proficient, and there was a 13-point disparity between Federal Way and the Washington State. We had 3 schools that were at or above the state average. And we had a 42-point disparity between our highest performing school and our lowest performing school for third grade. One of the things I want to note is you'll see a difference between our overall achievement in the SBA at being at 39% and the Fontes and Pinnell at 72%. So if we look at the same group of third graders that were in second grade the year before from this group, they were at about 66% on Fontes and Pinnell. But it's important to remember that when students take the SBA, it's a very different assessment and it's very rigorous. And so students are required to write, to research, and give written responses. So we can expect that it's a much bigger challenge for our students. So now we're going to continue to tell that story as we move into the middle years, and we'll be looking at what percentage of students are enrolled in advanced math and how many students have college-bound scholarships in the middle school years. So we'll start with 8th grade advanced math. In 8th grade for this school year, we have almost 1,700 students enrolled in 8th grade. Out of all of those students, we have 887 students that are enrolled in Algebra 1 or higher. This is just enrollment. So this is about half of our 8th grade students that are enrolled in Algebra 1, which is 53% if you do the math. If we look more closely at this data by school, this slide shows all of our students in middle schools and some of our other schools like Taft Academy that has an 8th grade but also goes higher than 8th grade. And it breaks down by each school. So the red bar is how many students are in 8th grade in that school, and the blue bar is how many students are in Algebra 1. Again, overall the district average is 53%. Taft Academy has all students in 8th grade enrolled in Algebra 1 or higher. You can look at the data and see overall there's an inconsistent enrollment rate among our schools for Algebra 1. Again, this only includes enrollment. It doesn't include their success in algebra. So one of the data points we'll be looking closely at now that we're mid-year and moving into the end of the year is how successful are students in Algebra 1. Our second data point for the middle years is college-bound scholarships. So college-bound scholarships are scholarships for 7th and 8th graders whose families are unable to pay for college. It promises an annual college tuition and a small book allowance. And the scholarship is a state-funded program administered by the Higher Education Coordinating Board. And so again, I'll direct you to the slide. It shows that we have almost 2,000 students right now in 7th or 8th grade that have the opportunity to have a college-bound scholarship. And currently we have about 800 students enrolled, which is 40%. Our goal in the Federal Way Public Schools will be 100%, and we've been working with our counselors and our coordinators to ensure that all of our 7th and 8th graders are enrolling in college-bound scholarships, because it definitely is a goal that we can attain. We feel like we can attain and we will attain. Next, I'm going to move to our baseline data around high school years. Specifically, we'll look at students on track for graduation and also how many students are completing high school successfully and graduating. So the first data point we'll look at is 9th graders with 7 credits or more. This is a really important indicator for us. And currently we have about 40% of our 9th graders that have earned 7 credits or more, and that's credits, and 4 of those credits are in the core subjects of science, math, reading, or social studies. That's less than half. The reason this is important is because in 9th grade we can look at early warning systems and be able to identify students that are not getting the credits that they need for graduation. We can dig deeper into this data as well to see how many students are earning credits by school as well. So I'm going to talk through this slide a little bit, and we'll also talk a little bit about schools that had 6 credits as well. But to start with, on this slide, we have all of our high schools listed out, reminding us that there's 40% of the students that have 7 credits or more. We have 3 schools that have a rate of 60% or higher: Taft Academy, TJ, and Todd Beamer. You'll notice, I'll go back. You'll notice that we have 3 schools, Decatur, Federal Way, and and Federal Way Public Academy that do not have nearly as many credits, and there's a reason for that. So those schools were on 6-period days last year. So this year we're on a 4x8 schedule where all students have the opportunity for 7 credits, but those 3 schools didn't have that opportunity. So we'll take a look at those 3 schools to see the percentage of students that earned 6 credits and had 4 in the core subjects. So Decatur had 56% of its students. Federal Way High School had 60, and FWPA had 88% that had 6 credits or more. Next year, as we move into the strategic planning, we'll be able to look at 7 credits across the board for all of our schools because of our schedule. So next we're going to look at our graduation rates in the Federal Way Public Schools. And we'll look at two data points. One is our on-time graduation rate, our 4-year rate, and then also our extended graduation rate for students that graduated within 5 years. For last year, our overall rate as a district for 4-year graduation was 77.8%, and our 5-year extended graduation rate was 81.6%. Right now, we don't have data for the state from last year to compare, but the state 2 years ago, the rate was at 78%. The national rate for 2 years, just for information, was 82% as well. This slide here shows our information by school, and we had 4 high schools with 4-year graduation rates of 80% or higher. That would be and I'm talking about the on-time rate, which would be the blue line as you look at the slides. So those schools would be Decatur High School, Thomas Jefferson High School, Todd Beamer, and Taft Academy. We can also compare how students are graduating compared with 4 years to 5 years, and we had Decatur and Thomas Jefferson that had a 7-point increase across those 2 data points. We can go beyond just the school level and look at the graduating class of 2015 by race and ethnicity. So the light blue line is the on-time graduation rate, and the dark blue line is the 5-year extended graduation rate. Again, the overall rate was 77.8%. The 5-year rate was 81.6%. As we look more closely, we can see that the highest 4-year rate was among our Asian, multiracial, white, and black subgroups for on-time graduation. Our lowest 5-year rates were among the Hispanic, Native American, and Pacific Islander groups. You can note that our Native American group was 13 students, so it's important to call out subgroups that have a low number because it can make the data look a little differently when you just look at percentages. Next, we'll look at more subgroup data around our program groups. So we'll look at our female, male, English language learners, our students with disabilities, our students with 504 plans, and our students that receive free and reduced lunch. So the highest 4-year rates among these groups were among our female student population, and the lowest 4-year rates were among our English language learners and our students with disabilities program groups. The next 2 slides I'll look at graduation trends. So we'll look at how students have graduated over the last 3 years. The green bar would be this past school year. The blue bar is 2 years ago, the class of 2014, and the red bar is the class of 2013. And this again is by race and ethnicity. So if we look at the trends, we can see that there's an upward trend or an increase in graduation over the last 3 years for our Black, Hispanic, and multiracial subgroups. There's an inconsistent or flat graduation rate for our Asian, Native American, White, and Pacific Islander subgroups. And the lowest graduation rate for just the class of 2015, which we've already reviewed, was among our Native American, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, and Pacific Islander subgroups. Our last graduation slide will be around our 3-year trend for our program group subgroups. So again, this is our female, male, English language learners, our students with disabilities, and our low-income students. Again, you can see the progression there. The red is from class of 2013. The dark blue bar is class of 2014. The light blue bar is this past school year, 2015. So there was an increase in graduation rates in 2015 for our female English language learner and low-income students. There was a decrease in graduation rates for our male and students with disabilities groups. And there's an inconsistent trend, except for overall an inconsistent trend, except for our low income and our female groups. And by inconsistent, just means over the 3 years it maybe went up or down, and there's not a consistent trend one way or the other. So another important data point to look at is how many students are applying for financial aid. And so the FAFSA is one way that students can do this. And so this slide shows how many students have submitted the FAFSA for the school year ending last year in 2015. The Washington State average for last year was 51% overall. The Federal Way Public Schools average was 55%. We had 853 students submit the FAFSA by the end of the school year last year. Our highest completion rates, and again, this shows, the blue bar shows how many students completed the FAFSA, and below it you can see how many students at the bottom were in that graduating class. So Todd, Beamer, and Decatur had the highest completion rates, nearing 60% for the FAFSA. Another point that the last data point we'll look at for this category of high school graduation is the WASFA, and this is the Washington Application for State Financial Aid. And this was an important point for us and for Dr. Campbell, because we want to recognize that some students that apply for financial aid can apply for programs that expand the opportunities to students that may not be able to apply for the FAFSA due to immigration status. This data is a little bit more sensitive, but what we do know is that 40 students in the Federal Way Public Schools submitted their application for the WASFA for the last school year. And out of all the students in the state, all the seniors in the state of Washington that completed the WASFA, we were about 5% of those students. All right, so it doesn't stop there, right? So we want to take a look at how successful are students when they graduate from the Federal Way Public Schools after they enter either the workforce or into college to attain a certification or a degree. So we'll look at how successful students are as they move on from high school. So this slide shows for the class of 2014 how many students enrolled directly to college. And this is a 2 or 4 year college compared with other school districts in the area. So out of all the class of 2014, 55% entered a 2 year or 4 year college in Federal Way. Out of all of the schools listed on this slide that are in the roadmap, this is 7th out of 8 of those schools for all the schools that graduated students in 2014. The next slide is to look at actual attainment. So with the previous slide, we looked at students that entered college. This is looking at how successful students are in actually getting a degree in a 2 or 4 year college. So the most recent data we can look at is students that graduated in 2009. That would be 6 years now where they graduated this past spring or summer with a degree. So in Federal Way, again, attainment is defined as 6 years of within graduation getting a degree. And we had about 38% of our Federal Way Public Way students from that class of 2009 attain a degree. We can look more closely at this in terms of race and ethnicity. And again, we had about 38% of our students. And so the bottom below this graph kind of breaks that out into numbers so you can think about our students in Federal Way. We had about 4 out of 10 students in that class of 2009 that attained a degree. About 3 out of 10 of the African American students attained a degree. 2 out of 10 Hispanic students attained a degree. 2 to 3 out of 10 low-income students attained a degree, and 4 out of 10 of our white students that graduated with a degree graduated with a degree in 2 or 4 year college. So that was a lot of information, a lot of data around our ends. Do you have any questions or comments around this data?
Board members? Dr. Wright?
I think it's important for everyone that's here and people that are at home to realize this is not the first time we've seen this data. This is not the first time we've talked about sub-End 1, graduation and advancement. We started the conversation many weeks ago at a retreat that most of us were present at. We then had a work study last week where we had the opportunity for you to share this and for us to have conversation. And then over the weekend, many of us filled out a survey that really got us to look at the content of the material and to really question the validity and just where it's going. And personally, I think some of the information is a little painful, but unless you face it and can focus and actually know where you are, you can't make progress. And I really appreciate the depth that you and your team have gone to in producing this document. And I really feel that having this focus, we can really laser target the areas that will help every student to graduate. So thank you.
Thank you.
Director Reto?
I think sometimes we lose sight of the public in all our discussions because we're insiders and we tend to understand the entire thing and have the proper context. So from the public's perspective, what they need to know is that the board set the end state policy, which was to ensure that our students will graduate with the academic knowledge and 21st century skills ready to succeed as a responsible citizen. Each student will graduate with the prerequisite skills and confidence to access college, career, and other post-secondary options. That's all that we've said. So now the Office of the Superintendent has come in and said, based on research, there's 4 factors for readiness. The kids need to have a foundational knowledge, they need to have good habits for success, they need to have problem-solving skills, and they need to have a roadmap, the steps towards success. It can't be a secret handshake only known by 5th-generation college goers on how to apply for college and do all these things. So with that in mind, they've looked at the 4 areas. At elementary school, they're going to make sure that the kids are on track early. In the middle schools, they're going to make sure that the kids, in terms of their math courses and in terms of their college-bound thinking, are thinking about their academic path. In high school, it's about graduation, it's about getting loans for college and making sure that they're on track. And I want to emphasize that when we say all means all, that's a key statement because I know that parents at home might be looking at these averages and thinking, well, they're only going to focus on those groups that are lagging. The superintendent and the board might be looking at averages as data. The teachers are looking at every single student and they're going to apply their professional judgments in making sure that the kids stay on track. And then they're looking at postgraduate. So once given the ability, the knowledge, and the skills to succeed, they know how to get into a college or get into a job, and the money aspects have been arranged. How does that translate into their success into the real world? And so they've come in with various metrics that they're going to be monitoring to ensure these things happen. But the bottom line is they're trying to achieve the policy statement that we've set. So there's a lot of data here, and it's going to be interesting, and some of it looks bad. It's the baseline, but this is what's going to be used in order for this district to move forward and improve. So I'm hoping that everyone has a better understanding and doesn't get confused by what we're doing here. I think the superintendent has done a great job in terms of interpreting what our end requirement is and setting up a structure to monitor it internally so that she can achieve success. Thanks.
I had one question, and it might be that an N might be too small at some point in time. So this isn't about, this is just a wonder that I would have. So if on slide 10, we talk about graduation rates 4 and 5 year by school, and then we have 4 and 5 year graduation rates by race and ethnicity. But nowhere do we have graduation rates around race and ethnicity by school. So at some point in time, or when PLCs happen and leadership starts looking at data, my hope would be, and it may be that there aren't enough students in any one given group if we look at it by school, but that we actually are looking also at the graduation rates by school, by race and ethnicity. So we can clearly see where we need to support, where we have patterns perhaps, where staff might need some additional professional learning or whatever, just a wonder.
I'll just make a real quick point. We recognize that once you start to go deeper, you get so much data that then you become inundated, but I think that's a point well taken, and we'll make sure that we think about that as we present these in the future.
All right, so the survey, as we've done over the last 3 years, was sent out, and there are responses that we need to look at. My job as the chair or president of this board is to come up with a single voice and a single response that has to be done when we make our determination in 2 weeks. So I'd like to look through these and see if there's any questions or comments, so I can try to create that document as we respond to this for our superintendent.
As you do that, I just want to thank Martin for the presentation. Nicely done.
Yes. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Well, I'll put forth a motion that we authorize the president to write up the monitoring report.
So there's a motion on the floor, but is there a second at this time? Not hearing a second, I'd like to actually talk about it, because what we need to do is kind of look at what the responses are. The idea is that we all 5 of us usually respond to this, and then we discuss what it looks like to determine what the responses are. So we can look at the responses for each one of the questions, and I know those of you in the audience can't see this, but this is part of the board work that we need to do publicly, and so I just want to make sure. So clarity of monitoring topic, is it clear with the board's ends policy criteria, and is it being reported for clarity of monitoring? And so there are responses. They seem, and as I look at them, they seem pretty aligned. I just want to make sure if there's any questions around that.
No, I think, and again, this is the second time we'd heard the presentation, and as a matter of fact, really the third time we really chatted about it, and there had been questions between the first time we initially talked about it and the second time where there was additional information put in there to add to baseline data. One example would be WA Kids, so there was a clear response about might there be some other data points that we hadn't considered, and so I appreciate that, and I think in the report that we got back in the presentation, it was very clear on what levels and the children we were looking at all levels, and also the clarity of what we were actually looking at and what we'll be monitoring on now that we have baseline data.
All right, so question 2.
Well, given that the public doesn't know what we're looking at, then it might be instructive to outline what exactly the questions that we put together and how they were developed.
So can you state that again? What are you wanting to do, Director Etta?
For the purposes of the public understanding what we're looking at, it might be instructive to let them know what the questions were and how those questions were developed.
So we worked actually with our consultant that we've been working with now since the July timeframe to come up with questions. Last year we actually kind of borrowed from our peer to the south of us, University Place, and used their questions. But based on the work we've done and the probably 60 hours now that we've spent really honing in on our policy governance, we partnered with that consultant to help us create questions around what we're looking at. And so those are these questions that were put forth to the board.
So I think with each sub-end, we have a kind of an overarching statement, and then we have the sub-ends. And our sub-end 1 is the presentation we had tonight around graduation and advancement. And in order for the board to assess the ends and what the superintendent has presented, we have to have a way to share that and a way to document and monitor that, and to determine as a board, since we're not individual votes, we're a vote all of one, a single voice, whether we believe as a board that the superintendent has in fact met the intent of that ends. And the job of the board is to set the end, which is kind of what we expect to see, and it's the superintendent's job to set the means, which is how it is that the district will get to the end that the board is setting. And that's really important because the expertise in those things do not lie with this board of 5. The expertise really lies with those that are hired in the district that come with the knowledge, the pedagogy, the understanding around evaluation, data collection, educational leadership, and all of that. So for every single end, sub-end that we monitor, and this is the first one, we have questions of the board that we would like all 5 board members to chime in on prior to a meeting like tonight to let us know from their individual perspective whether in fact the superintendent has met the intent of the monitoring report that's being heard. And since this is baseline and we've not done this in this way before, it's a little bit different because I think what we're looking at is, do we agree with the baseline data that we'll be getting for every end as we move forward? I think the other important piece is, although the president is in fact in charge of creating a single voice document, the single voice document needs to include all 5 voices or 4 voices. And so when we don't have responses from all members, I think it is important to make sure that we as a board are either an agreement with what's written here, have some additions that we'd like to see, and or then are willing to live with the single voice document that comes forth based on what information has been given when that comes to us for a formal vote next month. And so just really quickly, one is around the clarity of the topic and whether the superintendent's done a good job. The second one is the interpretation around alignment and around impact. And is it observable, and are they lined up with our policy statements? So what she's doing lined up and aligned and moving us forward in the way that we hope as a board will go. The third one is around whether there's stretch and impact, for if you don't stretch yourself or you continue to just do the same thing you've always done, you can say you've been successful, but you're not necessarily making the change for the observable condition or the outcome we're looking for. And then really the fourth is reasonable rationale. Again, is it observable? Is it an outcome that's appropriate? And is the target that we're looking for appropriate? And then the last 2 would be one around the evidence and whether it's clear and convincing, and whether we as board members individually understand the information that is being shared with us. So when we're reflecting, we're doing that from a place of knowledge rather than a place of wonder. And then the last one would be around whether there's evidence of demonstrated achievement and whether the metrics that are defined at the level of achievement that the superintendent planned in their interpretation. So, and I think these are the things sometimes you adjust and monitor as you go. But we need to see measures of progress, and we need to know that we're actually moving. And if we have targets now, we actually will know. So that would be my kind of reflection
I greatly
on the document.
appreciate that context. And so, for the record, I did not participate in this survey because I believe that if I'm going to have any criticisms about this report, that I would be accountable and voice those criticisms. I don't have any criticisms, and I think I've outlined exactly how I feel, what's been done. And so I'm very comfortable seeing, or at least at this point, not hearing any criticisms of moving forward and having this set of criteria approved.
Thanks.
And as I said in my earlier piece, I really found value in going through this survey because we set the ends, the specific verbiage, but the interpretation is importantly rolled out by the district. Once rolled out, I think it's important and respectful of us to give you feedback, to give the district feedback on whether we think you've done a good job, and that as we move forward, that we are happy with the interpretation that you've given. And certainly, as I explained earlier, I feel very comfortable, more than comfortable. I feel a lot of thought has gone into this report, and thank you.
So, Director Eto, I hear what you're saying, but part of my responsibility again as president is to make sure that all 5 voices are heard in the one voice. And that's why we chose to do a survey. You have the right to choose not to participate, but the last thing I want to do is what we did last year, where we had to go several reiterations around the single voice, and I'm trying to make it that in 2 weeks we can put this to bed. So I would hope that if you have anything that you're seeing here that you don't agree with, that you let me know that. It is part of our BSRs, or our board superintendent relationships. It's our responsibility to respond to what's been presented by the superintendent to make sure that we are doing all of these individual spaces and taking care of all of our student scholars and stretching to make sure that we're getting achievement to ultimately get to 100% of all students, as all means all. So at this point, unless anybody has any other comments, do we have any questions or comments?
Well, I think we're all on the same page. We're talking about making sure that all the voices are heard in public, and I think we've done that. If there was any thing that I was concerned about was the last question, evidence demonstrates achievement. And I thought we were going to get into the problem of last year, where we were going back and forth on whether or not baseline data was reflecting achievement. And clearly, we all interpreted this to mean that the evidence that we're going to use will demonstrate achievement. And so we didn't end up with that battle from last year. But I do appreciate the need to discuss these in public. And I think we came about it in 2 different ways and achieved the same objective.
Well, I think we do it all. It's not either or, it's and both. So I think there's a responsibility that each individual board member has to complete the survey, which is how we know where each of us is coming from, and that's a document that we would look at prior to the meeting. Then I think we have a responsibility that we come together at this meeting and have a conversation about now what I've looked at, because I don't know what you thought. What I know is what I heard tonight, which is great, but it's not written down for me to reflect on, and I don't need to know as an individual who said what, but I do want to know that my colleagues to my left and my right have their reflections here so I can look at it. And then this meeting would be where we would say, yep, I've had a chance to reflect and everything looks good. And then President McAnally would take this away and we would have the meeting next time with the formal monitoring report that would then be our self-assessment and our ability to check and say, yes, we've done this with fidelity, and we in fact have done a monitoring assessment of the end. So it's a process, and I think it has to be and both. It can't be an either or. And so my hope is as we move forward, we make sure that all of us understand the importance of writing our thinking down as well so we can reflect on that.
Okay.
At this time, we're adjourned.
Denise, I have to go to my house. I'm about to run.
And I'll be there as soon as I've
Okay.
been and pick mine up.
Thank you, okay?
And I've got some